Approval is not neutral. It is a contract you sign without reading. When you seek approval, you are not asking for agreement. You are declaring dependence. You announce that someone else's judgment matters more than your internal standard. Control hears this immediately and adjusts your placement downward. Approval does not create safety. It creates jurisdiction. The moment you seek approval, you identify an evaluator. That evaluator gains silent authority over your behavior, timing, and direction. You may believe you are aligning. In reality, you are ceding authorship. This is the first inversion. Approval feels protective because it reduces immediate friction. Long-term, it replaces autonomy with permission. Permission is the softest form of control and the most permanent. Approval-seeking trains others how to steer you. Once you ask, they learn 3 things. You will pause. Without consent, you will adjust to feedback. You will delay action to avoid disapproval from that point forward. They do not need to command you. They only need to withhold validation. You will self-correct. That is submission without force. Control prefers this arrangement because it is efficient. No confrontation, no enforcement, no visible hierarchy, just internalized restraint operating on your behalf. You stop acting to achieve outcomes. You start acting to preserve acceptance. This is how authority dissolves quietly. Approval-seeking also creates behavioral lag. You hesitate. You check. You soften decisions. You frame actions for acceptance rather than effect. Each delay signals uncertainty. Uncertainty invites oversight. Oversight narrows freedom. What began as politeness ends as structural dependency. Another inversion. Approval does not make you trusted. It makes you manageable. Trust is granted to those who act consistently without supervision. Approval-seeking proves the opposite. You require feedback to function. Feedback creates leverage. Leverage invites use. This is why approval-driven men are rarely given real authority. They are included, consulted, praised, but not deferred to. Deference requires self-authorization. History shows this pattern relentlessly. Those who waited to be sanctioned were outpaced by those who acted and let outcomes speak. Permission-based operators do not shape reality. They react to it. Approval also corrupts judgment. Once validation becomes currency, truth becomes flexible. You stop saying what is accurate and start saying what is acceptable. This does not make you moral. It makes you predictable. Predictable men are safe to keep close and easy to bypass. The most dangerous effect is internal. Approval-seeking fractures your internal compass. You stop asking what works and start asking what will be accepted. This subtle shift reorients every decision. You no longer optimize for survival or control. You optimize for belonging. Belonging is expensive. It requires constant signaling, alignment, and concession. Each concession reinforces the contract you signed the first time you asked for approval. You feel this as pressure, the need to explain, justify, reassure, clarify. All of it is downstream of one act, seeking permission to exist as you are. Control notices who does this and who does not. Those who act without approval introduce uncertainty. Uncertainty forces recalibration. Recalibration grants space. Space is authority. Those who seek approval eliminate uncertainty. Elimination invites routing. Routing leads to placement. Placement hardens. This chapter destroys the lie that approval equals alignment. Alignment achieved through permission is fragile and conditional. The moment approval is withdrawn, alignment collapses. And so do you. Real alignment comes from outcomes, not consensus. Approval is a submission contract because it hands others veto power over your momentum. Veto power is control. Control exercised quietly lasts longest. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. Every request for approval now reads as what it is: a pause before action, a request for jurisdiction, a willingness to be steered. Authority does not survive that posture. The shift begins when you stop asking to be chosen and start choosing your actions without audience. You will be misinterpreted. You will be judged. That judgment is the withdrawal pain of independence. Endure it. Approval feels safe because it avoids conflict. Authority requires tolerating it. The two cannot coexist. This chapter sets the frame. Approval is not social, it is structural. And once you step into it, stepping out becomes costly. Dependence does not arrive suddenly. It is trained. Approval becomes leverage through repetition. One request teaches nothing. Repeated validation seeking installs a mechanism that others begin using instinctively, often without conscious intent. This is the dependence conversion mechanism. It begins with micro requests, small checks, soft confirmations. Does this work? Are we aligned? Is this okay? Each one feels reasonable. Each one hands over a fraction of control. Control compounds. Every time you seek approval, you externalize regulation. You move the center of decision-making outside yourself. Others learn that your momentum is interruptible. Interruptibility is exploitable. Once interruptible, your timing no longer belongs to you. Decisions slow. Actions queue behind feedback. Initiative becomes conditional. This lag is visible. Control notices and adjusts your placement. The next phase is behavioral calibration. Observers begin shaping responses to influence you. Praise is delayed. Feedback is softened. Silence is introduced strategically. You feel this as uncertainty and respond by seeking more approval to restore equilibrium. The loop tightens. Approval seeking trains others to regulate you with minimal effort. They do not need to issue commands. They do not need authority. They only need to withhold validation. You will self-correct. This is the most efficient form of control because it is invisible. No one appears dominant. No hierarchy is announced. You simply stop moving without cues. Control systems love this. As dependence deepens, access is regulated. Opportunities arrive selectively. Information is shared conditionally. You are included when compliant and delayed when inconvenient. You interpret this as collaboration. It is filtration. Your outcomes begin to depend on perception management rather than execution. You adjust language, tone, and posture to maintain approval. This adjustment consumes bandwidth and degrades clarity. Clarity loss is leverage gain for others. Another layer forms: anticipatory compliance. You begin preempting disapproval. You censor ideas before they surface. You avoid decisive action unless consensus feels safe. This is not imposed. It is internalized. At this stage, control no longer needs to act. You regulate yourself. Dependence has converted. The mechanism also alters how others perceive you. Approval-seeking signals uncertainty of authority. People defer less. They challenge more. They route around you when speed matters. You are not excluded loudly. You are bypassed quietly. History shows this pattern clearly. Permission-based actors accumulate proximity, but not power. They sit near decisions, but do not shape them. Their presence is tolerated. Their direction is optional. Why? Because direction that requires permission is not direction. The final stage is outcome distortion. Once approval governs action, outcomes are optimized for acceptability, not effectiveness. Risk is avoided. Innovation dulls. Decisions become reversible. Control senses stagnation and reallocates momentum elsewhere. You are still present, but no longer central. This is why approval dependence is so damaging. It does not collapse you. It shrinks you. Gradually, invisibly, permanently. The dependence conversion mechanism thrives because it feels cooperative. It masquerades as alignment, teamwork, respect. In reality, it is a system for regulating those unwilling to self-authorize. Self-authorizing individuals disrupt this mechanism. They act, observe outcomes, and adjust without asking permission. Their behavior forces others to respond to reality instead of regulating momentum. That response is expensive. Control prefers the cheaper option. Dependent actors who regulate themselves. This chapter exposes the mechanism so it can be dismantled. Approval is not just a social gesture. It is a training signal. Each repetition teaches others how to manage you. Once trained, the mechanism runs automatically. You are not pressured. You are paced. You are not opposed. You are steered. Understanding this ends the illusion that approval is harmless. It is the entry point for quiet authority transfer. The more you seek it, the less authority you retain. Dependence is not demanded. It is accepted, one approval at a time. Approval seeking does not look the same on everyone. It wears different masks, but the outcome is identical: authority leakage. These archetypes are not weak by intention. They are disciplined, capable, often admired. That is what makes them dangerous to themselves. Their behaviors look cooperative while quietly surrendering control. The pleaser optimizes for harmony. He anticipates reactions, softens edges, and adjusts constantly to maintain emotional equilibrium. He believes smooth relationships equal influence. In reality, he is broadcasting compliance. Every adjustment signals that external comfort outranks internal direction. Control learns that friction will redirect him. Over time, he is given tasks, not authority. He becomes reliable, but steerable. Pleasers are never resisted. They are used. The clarifier explains before being asked. He adds context, intent, and justification to every decision. He believes clarity builds trust. It builds predictability. By over-explaining, the clarifier hands others his internal map: priorities, fears, constraints. Control does not need to guess his next move. It already knows. This makes him easy to preempt, override, or delay. Clarifiers feel transparent. Control feels prepared. The deferential executor, this archetype waits for instruction. He executes flawlessly once given direction, but hesitates to initiate without explicit approval. He believes respect comes from staying in lane. Control agrees and keeps him there. Deferential executors are prized in stable environments and ignored when direction is unclear. Their deference signals comfort with subordination. Over time, they stop being consulted on strategy and are valued only for throughput. They move fast, but never first. The consensus chaser, this archetype seeks alignment before action. He gathers opinions, checks buy-in, and avoids unilateral moves. He believes consensus protects him from backlash. It protects others from him. Consensus chasing distributes responsibility so widely that authority evaporates. Control sees indecision masked as collaboration. When speed matters, the consensus chaser is bypassed. He is included in discussions and excluded from decisions. All four archetypes share a fatal behavior. They outsource authorization. They wait to be allowed to move. They ask permission indirectly. They regulate themselves through others' reactions. This creates a dependency footprint that control exploits effortlessly. Another inversion. These archetypes are often praised early. They are called team players, communicators, culture carriers. That praise is not elevation. It is containment reinforcement. Praise substitutes for power. Over time, each archetype experiences the same ceiling. Influence stalls. Decisions route elsewhere. Authority feels close but never arrives. They work harder, communicate better, seek more alignment, deepening the loop. Control does not punish them. It parks them. The tragedy is awareness without correction. Many sense something is wrong, but misdiagnose it as politics, timing, or visibility. They double down on approval behaviors instead of withdrawing them. This is how authority drains permanently. Breaking out requires abandoning the behaviors that earn praise. This feels counterintuitive and risky. You will be misread. Resistance will appear. Silence will feel unsafe. That discomfort is the cost of sovereignty. Approval-seeking archetypes do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they signal permission dependency in environments that reward self-authorization. Control elevates those who act without asking and adjust without explaining. Those who tolerate disapproval without retreat. Those who let outcomes justify decisions. This chapter names the patterns so they can be dismantled. If you recognize yourself here, Do not self-correct by performing confidence. Performance is still signal. You correct by removing the behaviors entirely. No pleasing. No preemptive clarity. No waiting. No consensus rituals. Authority returns only when approval stops governing movement. History does not remember those who waited to be allowed. It remembers those who moved first and forced permission to follow reality. Those who relied on approval were not opposed, they were outpaced. And being outpaced is a quieter, more permanent form of erasure. Human nature explains this simply. Systems reward initiative that reduces uncertainty, not compliance that preserves it. Approval-based actors delay action to maintain acceptance. In doing so, they surrender the only leverage that matters: momentum. History repeatedly selects against this posture. Those who sought permission optimized for safety. Those who self-authorized optimized for outcomes. Outcomes reshape structure. Safety maintains it. Structure rewards the reshaper. Approved men become caretakers of the present. Self-authorizing men become architects of the future. This is why history erases the approved. They preserve order while others redefine it. Another pattern emerges across eras. Permission-based operators accumulate proximity, but not power. They are close to leaders, councils, decision rooms. They are consulted, praised, trusted, until speed or risk is required. At that moment, they are bypassed. Not because they are disliked, but because they are slow. Slow not in execution, but in authorization. They wait for consensus. They seek alignment. They hesitate where certainty is unavailable. History does not pause for alignment. Colder operators act under ambiguity. They accept misinterpretation. They tolerate backlash. They move with incomplete information and correct later. This posture terrifies approval seekers because it risks judgment. History rewards it because it produces change. Another historical mechanism: approval centralizes authority elsewhere. Those who ask permission reinforce the evaluator's dominance. Over time, evaluators consolidate power simply by being asked. The approved become instruments of someone else's will. When conditions shift, instruments are replaced, not consulted. Control is retained by those who never asked to begin with. History also shows that approval-based loyalty decays fastest. Those who require permission often require protection. They depend on alignment with prevailing authority. When authority shifts, they scramble to realign or are discarded. Self-authorizing operators survive transitions because they are positioned by outcomes, not allegiance. They are not chosen. They are tolerated because removing them would disrupt momentum. This is the real danger of approval. It ties your relevance to someone else's continued consent. Consent is fragile. Power changes hands. Structures collapse. Approved men fall with them. Human nature compounds this erasure through status memory. People remember who waited and who acted. When future decisions arise, those memories guide trust. Reliable becomes safe. Safe becomes limited. The approved are remembered as supportive, not decisive. History does not elevate supporters. It elevates drivers. Drivers generate resistance. Resistance confirms agency. Agency forces recognition. Another inversion. The approved often believe they will be rewarded later for patience. History shows the opposite. Patience without action becomes invisibility. By the time permission arrives, relevance has passed. This is why eras shift under men no one voted for, sanctioned, or approved. They acted while others waited to be invited. The invitation came after the outcome. History erases the approved not through punishment, but through irrelevance. They are not attacked. They are ignored. Their ideas sound reasonable, but late. Their presence feels helpful, but optional. Optionality is the death of authority. This chapter deepens the threat clearly. If your posture depends on permission, your legacy depends on someone else's continuity. When that continuity breaks, so do you. Cold operators understand this. They do not seek approval because approval chains them to the present order. They accept short-term rejection to gain long-term authorship. History favors authors. Those who wait to be sanctioned inherit yesterday. Those who move without permission create tomorrow. The approved preserve comfort. The self-authorized reshape reality. History does not argue with either. It simply remembers one and deletes the other. Approval dependence does not end by mindset. It ends by behavioral removal. This chapter installs the actions that collapse validation hooks permanently. Not confrontation, not rebellion, withdrawal. The first behavior is refusal to pre-clear action. You stop asking if something is acceptable before acting. No soft checks. No just aligning. No permission-seeking disguised as courtesy. You decide, act, and allow response to follow reality. This is not recklessness. It is authorship. Pre-clearance trains others to intercept you. Removing it restores momentum. Momentum is leverage. The second behavior is delay under scrutiny. Approval seeking accelerates when watched. You rush to reassure. You answer immediately. You fill silence. This is where dependence leaks fastest. You reverse this. When attention spikes, you slow down. You do not respond on contact. You insert time, not to signal dominance, but to break conditioning. Delay disrupts expectation. Expectation is the approval mechanism's fuel. Delayed response forces others to wait on you. Waiting reverses hierarchy. The third behavior is unilateral execution on low visibility actions. You do not announce everything. You do not socialize every decision. You act where impact can be demonstrated without debate. Then you let outcome speak. Outcome-first execution collapses validation loops instantly. Once results exist, approval becomes irrelevant. Reality outranks opinion. The fourth behavior is removal of justification language. Approval seeking hides inside explanation. Because. Just to clarify, my thinking was. These phrases reopen the door to evaluation. You close it. Decisions are stated, not defended. If challenged, you do not argue intent. You reference outcome or boundary. Nothing else. Justification invites negotiation. Negotiation restores dependence. The fifth behavior is selective non-response. Not everything deserves acknowledgement. Approval-driven men respond to everything to maintain alignment. This trains others to expect access. You break this pattern. You respond where leverage exists. You ignore what does not alter position. Silence recalibrates expectation faster than explanation ever could. Scarcity creates authority. The sixth behavior is tolerance for negative interpretation. Withdrawal will be misread. People will assume arrogance, disengagement, or defiance. Approval seekers rush to correct this. That correction reinstalls the loop. You do not correct. Misinterpretation is the withdrawal tax. Pay it once or remain dependent forever. Over time, behavior clarifies what explanation never could. Those who matter adjust. Those who don't exit. The seventh behavior is decoupling self-worth from reception. Approval dependence survives because rejection feels like threat. You must separate internal stability from external response. This is not emotional work. It is structural. You stop checking reactions. You stop scanning faces. You stop modulating tone for acceptance. Output becomes flat and deliberate. Flat output denies hooks. The eighth behavior is acting without consensus, then absorbing fallout silently. Consensus chasing is approval seeking with camouflage. You replace it with action and consequence tolerance. You do not seek agreement beforehand. You manage disagreement afterward, without apology. Apology restores permission. Silence preserves authorship. The ninth behavior is repetition without announcement. One act without approval is dismissed as anomaly. Repetition forces reclassification. You must apply these behaviors consistently until the old model fails. Failure of the old model creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates space. Space restores leverage. This is the point most men abandon the shift. Discomfort spikes before authority returns. Access narrows briefly. Praise disappears. Silence grows. that silence is progress. Control recalibrates only when it becomes inefficient to manage you through validation. When approval no longer regulates your movement, the mechanism collapses. You are no longer steered. You are reacted to. This chapter installs the operational reversal. You stop seeking permission and start letting outcomes justify presence. You do not announce independence. You demonstrate it through absence of approval behavior. Authority does not arrive with applause. It arrives with less interference. When approval hooks are gone, others must engage you directly or not at all. Either outcome restores leverage. The withdrawal is quiet. The effect is permanent. Chapter 6. The death of the approved self. The approved self survives on permission. It measures worth through acceptance, safety through consensus, direction through sanction. It is calm when liked and destabilized when questioned. This identity must be terminated. The approved self is not weak. It is conditioned. From early environments, approval was framed as survival. Acceptance meant access. Disapproval meant exclusion. Over time, this wiring fused identity with reception. You learned to regulate yourself through others' reactions. Control exploits this perfectly. An identity that requires validation cannot hold authority. Authority requires acting without reassurance. Reassurance creates jurisdiction. Jurisdiction creates control. The approved self confuses being liked with being safe. In power systems, likability is irrelevant. Safety comes from being unnecessary to manage. The approved self is always managed by praise, silence, delay, or subtle cues. This identity leaks authority constantly. It softens decisions to remain acceptable. It explains to avoid judgment. It waits to move until sanction arrives. Each behavior reinforces dependence. The death begins when you accept a hard truth. Likability is a leash. Once you internalize this, you stop trying to be understood. You stop narrating intent. You stop preempting rejection. You allow misalignment to exist without correction. This feels like loss at first. The approved self experiences withdrawal. Silence feels hostile. Neutral reactions feel threatening. Lack of feedback feels like danger. These sensations are not signals. They are symptoms. Do not treat them. The sovereign posture that replaces the approved self is built on self-authorization. You act because action is required, not because acceptance is guaranteed. You evaluate outcomes, not reactions. You correct errors, not perceptions. This posture is unemotional by design, not numb, contained. Containment ends the need for reassurance. The sovereign posture does not seek approval because it does not outsource legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from alignment with objective outcomes. Stability, leverage, survival. If an action works, it stands. If it fails, it is corrected, not apologized for. Apologies reopen jurisdiction. Corrections preserve authorship. Another critical shift: you stop performing values. The approved self advertises morality to secure belonging. The sovereign posture practices values privately and lets consequences speak publicly. Public virtue invites regulation. Private standards preserve autonomy. As this identity installs, your behavior changes subtly but decisively. You answer when timing favors outcome. You refuse without explanation. You move without announcement. You accept judgment without defense. Others feel this shift immediately. Some withdraw. Some challenge. Some attempt to reassert control through praise or pressure. You do not respond. Non-response is not defiance. It is disengagement from validation circuits. Over time, control recalibrates. Without approval hooks, it cannot pace you. Without pacing, it must react to you. Reaction is power's admission of lost control. This is where authority quietly returns. The approved self fears isolation because isolation once meant danger. The sovereign posture understands isolation as filtration. Those who require your validation leave. Those who can operate without it remain. Your environment cleans itself. Another inversion completes the death. You stop equating rejection with error. Rejection becomes data. Data is neutral. Neutral data informs adjustment without compromising direction. This removes the last hold approval had on you. The approved self wanted permission to exist. The sovereign posture exists without audience. This identity does not need to be liked to function. It does not need to be praised to persist. It does not need to be sanctioned to move. It tolerates misunderstanding longer than others can tolerate uncertainty. That tolerance is dominance. Once the approved self is gone, approval loses leverage permanently. Praise becomes pleasant but irrelevant. Disapproval becomes noise. Silence becomes neutral. You no longer ask, "Am I allowed?" You ask, "What is effective?" That question alone reorders hierarchy. This chapter completes the internal severance. Validation is no longer currency. Consent is no longer required. Reassurance is no longer sought. You operate from position, not permission. And from that posture, authority no longer needs to be claimed. It is conceded, quietly, structurally, and without your participation. The approved self survives on permission. It measures worth through acceptance, safety through consensus, direction through sanction. It is calm when liked and destabilized when questioned. This identity must be terminated. The approved self is not weak. It is conditioned. From early environments, approval was framed as survival. Acceptance meant access. Disapproval meant exclusion. Over time, this wiring fused identity with reception. You learned to regulate yourself through others' reactions. Control exploits this perfectly. An identity that requires validation cannot hold authority. Authority requires acting without reassurance. Reassurance creates jurisdiction. Jurisdiction creates control. The approved self confuses being liked with being safe. In power systems, likability is irrelevant. Safety comes from being unnecessary to manage. The approved self is always managed by praise, silence, delay, or subtle cues. This identity leaks authority constantly. It softens decisions to remain acceptable. It explains to avoid judgment. It waits to move until sanction arrives. Each behavior reinforces dependence. The death begins when you accept a hard truth. Likability is a leash. Once you internalize this, you stop trying to be understood. You stop narrating intent. You stop preempting rejection. You allow misalignment to exist without correction. This feels like loss at first. The approved self experiences withdrawal. Silence feels hostile. Neutral reactions feel threatening. Lack of feedback feels like danger. These sensations are not signals. They are symptoms. Do not treat them. The sovereign posture that replaces the approved self is built on self-authorization. You act because action is required, not because acceptance is guaranteed. You evaluate outcomes, not reactions. You correct errors, not perceptions. This posture is unemotional by design, not numb, contained. Containment ends the need for reassurance. The sovereign posture does not seek approval because it does not outsource legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from alignment with objective outcomes, stability, leverage, survival. If an action works, it stands. If it fails, it is corrected, not apologized for. Apologies reopen jurisdiction. Corrections preserve authorship. Another critical shift: you stop performing values. The approved self advertises morality to secure belonging. The sovereign posture practices values privately and lets consequences speak publicly. Public virtue invites regulation. Private standards preserve autonomy. As this identity installs, your behavior changes subtly but decisively. You answer when timing favors outcome you refuse. Without explanation, you move without announcement. You accept judgment without defense. Others feel this shift immediately. Some withdraw. Some challenge. Some attempt to reassert control through praise or pressure. You do not respond. Non-response is not defiance. It is disengagement from validation circuits. Over time, control recalibrates. Without approval hooks, it cannot pace you. Without pacing, it must react to you. Reaction is power's admission of lost control. This is where authority quietly returns. The approved self fears isolation because isolation once meant danger. The sovereign posture understands isolation as filtration. Those who require your validation leave. Those who can operate without it remain. Your environment cleans itself. Another inversion completes the death. You stop equating rejection with error. Rejection becomes data. Data is neutral. Neutral data informs adjustment without compromising direction. This removes the last hold approval had on you. The approved self wanted permission to exist. The sovereign posture exists without audience. This identity does not need to be liked to function. It does not need to be praised to persist. It does not need to be sanctioned to move. It tolerates misunderstanding longer than others can tolerate uncertainty. That tolerance is dominance. Once the approved self is gone, approval loses leverage permanently. Praise becomes pleasant but irrelevant. Disapproval becomes noise. Silence becomes neutral. You no longer ask, "Am I allowed?" You ask, "What is effective?" That question alone reorders hierarchy. This chapter completes the internal severance. Validation is no longer currency. Consent is no longer required. Reassurance is no longer sought. You operate from position, not permission. And from that posture, authority no longer needs to be claimed. It is conceded, quietly, structurally, and without your participation. This is the final warning. Approval is never temporary. Once you build a life, career, or identity around being chosen, you surrender authorship permanently. Approval does not visit and leave. It settles, restructures behavior, and installs ceilings you will never see, only feel. Elite selection begins where this truth is accepted without argument. There are two categories of men, and movement between them is rare. The first category continues asking. They ask directly or indirectly. They seek alignment, reassurance, consensus, sanction. They wait for signals before acting. They mistake proximity for power and inclusion for influence. These men feel involved. They are consulted, updated, invited, praised for collaboration. Their opinions are heard, then ignored when action is required. Their presence comforts decision-makers because it poses no threat. They are safe. Safety is why they are capped. Control does not elevate those who require permission to function. Permission creates drag. Drag slows momentum. Momentum is what reshapes structures. Structures do not move for those who wait. These men are not punished. They are preserved in place. The second category acts first. They do not ask to be chosen. They choose actions based on outcome, not reception. They accept misinterpretation, resistance, and silence as part of the cost. They move without announcement and let results force recognition. These men feel exposed early. They are judged, misread, resisted, sometimes excluded. Approval is withheld deliberately to test whether they will retreat. Many do. Those who don't are marked. Elite selection filters for one trait above all others: the ability to operate without validation. This trait predicts independence, resilience, and low manageability. Low manageability is not rebellion. It is sovereignty. Control cannot steer what does not check for signals. This is why self-authorizing operators are elevated reluctantly, not because they are liked, but because ignoring them becomes expensive. Their actions alter reality faster than permission-based systems can regulate. Eventually, control adapts, not by praising them, but by deferring. Deferral is the real promotion. It arrives quietly. Fewer interruptions. Fewer approvals required. Fewer explanations demanded. Space appears. No one announces it. The permanent cost of approval is this: every time you ask to be chosen, you teach the system that you will wait. Systems remember this. They route around waiting. Waiting men inherit stability. Acting men inherit uncertainty. Uncertainty is where authority forms. History confirms this relentlessly. Those who shaped eras were rarely approved beforehand. They were resisted, doubted, criticized. Approval followed outcome, not intent. Those who waited for approval inherited what was left. This chapter draws the final line. If you continue asking, You will be managed through feedback, paced through access, redirected through silence. You will feel close to power without ever holding it. If you act first, you will endure isolation, absorb judgment, operate without reassurance. You will feel alone early and deferred to later. Elite selection is not a reward. It is a byproduct of cost. When regulating you becomes inefficient, authority shifts. Not because you demanded it, but because resistance failed. The final doctrine is uncompromising. Stop asking to be chosen. Stop waiting to be approved. Stop calibrating yourself to acceptance. Act. Observe outcomes. Adjust without apology. Let reality justify you. Those who cannot tolerate the silence will always return to approval. Those who can will cross a threshold quietly and never need to ask again. Approval creates permission. Permission creates dependence. Dependence erases authority. Elite operators accept rejection early to avoid irrelevance later. They pay the price once, up front, instead of paying forever through ceilings they cannot name. This is the final separation. One group waits to be selected and lives inside the limits that follow. The other selects actions and forces the system to adjust. History remembers the second group without remembering when permission was ever given, because it never was.